Bryan Clark, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute. It's great to see you again, my friend. Thanks for joining me today. A lot of discussion here about integration of autonomous systems into the force. And we talked a little bit before we went on the air about how gratifying it is as I'm watching these things that to see that the conversation doesn't revolve around, hey, we have to go get some autonomous stuff. It's how do we think about autonomy as an important part of, but just part of, the fleet.
Yeah, absolutely, Francis. Thanks for having me on. It's great to see you again. The challenge that we're seeing today is not how much money do we have for autonomous systems or which ones to buy. We're sorting out those questions. Now the question is, how do I deploy them into the fleet? How do I integrate them with the operational forces? How do I use them to solve operational problems that the combatant commanders are trying to address? And this gets to some of Admiral Cottle's idea of the tailored forces, which we work with him on. Is that's a way of at least making this problem more tractable, right? If I'm going to try to integrate unmanned systems into the entire Navy, that's like boiling the ocean, right? But if I instead say, well, I'm going to put out these tailored forces that use mostly autonomous systems with a few manned systems to do command and control or support, that's more manageable. So let's figure out a way to field these little force packages to address these very narrow operational problems. And we're seeing a lot of progress in terms of designing those and then figuring out how they're going to get deployed. But this is a big question right now: is we've got our people that do training and equipping for the submarine force and the surface force and the Air Force. What does it look like for these robotic and autonomous systems?
You mentioned progress. What's driving that progress and what will maintain that momentum in your view?
Well, you've got operational commanders like Admiral Paparo who are yelling for the Navy to deliver on the capabilities to do things like his hellscape idea of having one-way attack drones like we see in Ukraine, being able to defend Taiwan. You've got other countries like Japan is looking at the same thing to say, well, can we use one-way attack drones? They have this shield concept to protect our islands. And you've got Australia looking at how do I use autonomous systems to give me more reach and persistence over the vast area they have to cover with their relatively small military. So you got operational pull, and then you've got the technology push where there's a lot of money flowing into this area. You got a lot of companies that are actively developing these capabilities. And the part that's sort of been missing is the middle, which is Navy people doing what we call force generation. So doing the concept development, the training, the equipping, and then the actual delivery of these systems into the field. That's the part that's missing, and that's what the Navy's been really focused on over the last 3 or 4 months.
I note from my discussions with CNO Caudle that force generation is an integral part of the fighting instructions. And so now that middle has been filled in, it strikes me.
Right, definitely at the senior level, he recognizes that gap, and he wants to apply that standard model, which he calls for force generation, to now robotic and autonomous systems. And I think what the Navy is likely to do is probably give this as basically something that the submarine forces and the surface forces are now charged with. Is you're generating submarines that are ready to go on deployment. You're generating unmanned undersea vehicles. You're generating, if you're the surface guys, unmanned surface vehicles that go out to these tailored forces. And then the missing part is, well, how do I do the concept development and experimentation? Who's responsible for that? And they're sorting that out right now.
From a cultural perspective, too, it strikes me that one of the things I was fascinated about by the fighting instructions is there are 4 pillars and there's a name attached to each one. So rather than thinking someone in that middle, rather than someone thinking, well, this will happen at some point or someone will do it, there's somebody will be graded on whether or not any of these aspects happen, including the force generation.
Right, right, absolutely. He wants there to be accountability, which is not about punishing people if they fail, but it's more like making sure that somebody feels like they own it and then they can take charge of it. Because I think a lot of times what you see is people feel responsible for it, but they don't feel empowered to go run out and do the actions that need to get done. And so in this force generation area, it's good to see that we're actually empowering people to go be in charge of the development and deployment of these systems. Because until we get that sorted out, we will end up with sort of a stopgap or like a barrier that prevents these systems that are being developed from actually reaching the field. They'll kind of bunch up here in CONUS and not get out to the locations overseas where they need to be deployed.
We've talked so far in this conversation mostly on a strategic level. From a tactical perspective,
Yeah.
what barriers need to be removed or obstacles overcome to do what you just described, to get these out to sailors and Marines that are on the front lines?
Well, one big problem is contracting. Yes, we've done all this acquisition reform in the department, and one thing we haven't really done is contracting reform. There's new contracting methodologies that are out there, but they aren't really being employed. So the complaint I hear all the time from people on the government side and from the industry side is contracting is too slow. We've got to, someone makes an acquisition decision very quickly, and then it takes forever to get the thing on contract and get money moving to allow us to actually deliver it. The other thing is, getting to this idea of open architecture and allowing systems to play with each other, making it so that you really do have software that you can make interoperable between providers. That's something that's been a roadblock, and so that's been something that's the Navy has sort of stumbled over as they try to field systems in packages like these tailored forces.
The idea of MOSA is something that we've talked about it a lot
Right.
today, a lot on this program. The hesitation doesn't seem to be from the government side, and it doesn't seem to be from the industry side. So I'm not sure, I guess, where the hesitation is coming
Yeah,
from.
it's mostly when you get down to the program manager level and making decisions about what you're demanding of your contractors. So industry is more than happy to make it, available the necessary interfaces so they know how other companies know how to write software against their systems. But it's the government getting in there and enforcing these rules. The Secretary of War had to publish a memo a couple months ago to say all interfaces for software will be published and owned by the government. Well, someone's got to enforce that rule if you want there to be interoperability between these systems. And I've seen a reticence on the part of the program managers to really make that something that's a demand that they enforce and then apply in these contracts.
Bryan, there's always more stuff than there is time.
That's
Thank
right.
you for joining me again.
Great to see you, Francis.